Hey everybody, what's good? What's going on? JB here with another CyberInsight live stream. It's Friday, and we're gonna do something a little bit different this evening. I wasn't actually planning on going live tonight, but I've had some people ask recently about trying to get a grasp on some different types of formatting for documents related to them starting up their own tech services companies or consulting gigs or sole proprietorship type of things. And yeah, I wanted to throw this video together to kind of walk through one of the primary things that is going to come up first when it comes to that, and that is, how do you tell your client what it is that they need to pay you? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to create or how to create a basic invoice. This is coming from the perspective of me being a business owner and having a tech consulting company. So the things that we're going to walk through on the sample invoice are kind of related to that. But really, this would be applicable to any type of general invoice that you would be sending out to a client whenever you do any type of work, really. So I'm going to try and hit a few of the things that I think are important that are going to make things easier for your client to understand what it is that you're providing to them, to be able to get prompt payment, and then vice versa, making sure that the things that you have on these invoices are useful to you if you have to go back and do any type of auditing or correlation, different types of data. So as always, I appreciate it if you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video with your friends, all that good stuff. And if you have any questions as we're kind of going through this, then you can throw those in the chat, and I will try to answer those as best as I can as we move through this. So yeah, let's just jump into this, and we'll kind of see how this goes. This is definitely going to be, for me, I don't normally make very many business videos. As I kind of mentioned, I do have my own company. So I guess a quick shout out, if you or your organization needs any help from an IT perspective, architecture, design, cybersecurity, GRC, hit me up. Definitely glad to talk to folks to see if there's any things that my company might be able to help fill in some gaps for you. But that was a small plug. Let's hop into this. So this is a sample invoice. I kind of have gone through and redacted a lot of information just to make it a little bit more general use here and not throw anything out there that I shouldn't be. Full disclosure, I use QuickBooks for all of my business accounting things. I highly recommend that for other people. It just makes things so much easier as far as tracking things. You can sync up all of your bank accounts to that. I actually do my invoicing through QuickBooks. And so this is kind of what a generic invoice that would come out of QuickBooks would look like. There's a few things that you can kind of tweak to change some of the different fields there. But generally speaking, this is going to be, enough to get you going in the direction that you need to go. So high level, right up at the top left-hand corner, you're going to want to have your information. So your business information, your address, phone, email, ways for folks to contact you. Especially if you're doing a lot of business, folks will be contacting you because eventually there will be some things that do arise, where they need to double check some things. So making sure that they have good contact information there is important. If you want to be fancy and look somewhat professional, you can also throw your company logo or whatever over on the right-hand side. The bill to section is kind of important in a few different ways, right? So when you start working for larger organizations, let's say that you have a contract with a really big company, or let's say you have multiple contracts with a really big company. A lot of times they manage different organizations within that company differently, and you might have different types of purchase orders with those different organizations. So your invoice might not actually be going to the same person in that company. So having a customer POC specific to your purchase order that you have with that organization is very important. And then obviously customer name and addresses are good to have on there as well. Although really in most cases, everything here is digital. So that's a little bit more of a formality. In my case, since I use QuickBooks, that automatically sends out an email to the POCs for the company that I have listed. There's email addresses that kind of get attached within QuickBooks to the invoice to who it's going to, and they get sent a URL that pretty much allows them to go and look at this invoice. The nice thing for me from a tracking perspective is it allows me to see when they've looked at it, how often they've looked at it. So that way you're not kind of left in the dark. If you were to actually physically mail a letter into a company, you wouldn't necessarily know that they even received it. Or even from an email perspective, things can get lost. And you might not really know what the status is of the invoices that you've sent in. I see some folks dropping in here with some comments and stuff like that, so we'll just throw these up real quick and then keep moving through here. Hey, what's going on? Appreciate folks dropping in. From Chuck and his globe. Cool. What's up, Davin? I see you in here. That's awesome. Thanks for joining. This is probably would be pretty beneficial to you as well, although I'm sure your wife could share a lot of information on what she does for invoicing and stuff like that, since she's has those cakes and cupcakes, which I'm still waiting for, by the way. If only you happen to be up in the area sometime soon, that might. No, I'm just playing. Let's see what else. All right, I also use QuickBooks. Have you ever tried Dubsado or Workflow Operational Automation? I have not. I haven't really had to do that outside of QuickBooks. Just works perfect for me. I use some other time tracking software, and we'll get to how that kind of plays into here in just a moment. But that's pretty much it that I need to use for my workflow as far as figuring out what is actually going into the invoices. Okay. So the next area of that, if we go down a little bit further, it's going to be the invoice number. Now this is kind of useful for a few different reasons. First off, it's useful to just have a standard nomenclature that you're using when referencing billing with your customer or your client. So as I guess I'm going to keep pumping this up. I should really be getting some type of cut from QuickBooks on this, but they automatically generate your different invoice numbers. And that makes it super easy when either referencing a specific bill with your customer, or if you need to go back and look something up within your system, having uniform invoice numbers that are sequential makes it a lot easier to go back and search for that type of stuff. The next field being the date field. That's going to be more so the date that the invoice is actually sent. There's a few different date fields on here, and they all kind of have a few different meanings behind them, and why. We'll get into why you need each of those. All right, so total due is actually going to be a combination of all of the different line items that you have on your invoice. And you might have multiple line items depending upon a few different types of scenarios. So in this case, and normally the way that it works with a lot of my clients, it's either going to be a flat fee or an hourly rate. And that's going to be tied back to an individual purchase order. So purchase order is going to be like a specific contract that you have with them. So my main line that I normally would bill out to clients is going to be for an individual purchase order for a certain period of time. So maybe you bill every 30 days, maybe you bill every week, maybe you bill every 15 days, whatever it is. That would be kind of, the primary line from my perspective as far as my hours worked for that particular client. And that would go on one line as we just have here. There are different circumstances where you might have multiple lines within an invoice. Some things that I can think of kind of off the top of my head is maybe if you have to do some travel for your client and that is reimbursable and a reimbursable expense. Obviously, that would be something that would need to be negotiated in whatever the contract is that you have between yourself and your client. In most cases, travel should be reimbursable. So that might be a separate line item on this invoice. Another thing that could be negotiated is, say, if you have to buy some type of software, hardware, that might be another reimbursable expense, and you could put this under that. One thing that I do like to point out, again, going back to a scenario of working for a large organization and maybe having multiple contracts with them. Normally, large companies like to or require actually having separate invoices for separate purchase orders, just because of the way that they do their billing within their internal systems. Even if you were to have, let's say, 5 contracts with one company, you wouldn't necessarily stack all of the different line items that would be going on different invoices from different purchase orders into one invoice. That probably will confuse your system quite a bit. So in my experience, it's always been unique purchase orders end up having their own unique invoices. That does make it a little bit more work on the back end once it comes time to sending out your invoices. So you might end up, sending out multiple invoices to the same client. But yeah, it's just kind of the way the game is. And realistically, keeping everything kind of separated makes things a little bit easier from an accounting perspective. So yeah, kind of just is what it is. So we talked about the total due being a combination of all of the line items that you have below. Due date is going to be derived from whatever the terms are that you have negotiated on your contract. If you are a small company or a sole proprietor, you want those terms to be as low as you can possibly get. Here we have it listed as net 30. So that means 30 days from whenever I submit the invoice, I am expecting to have payment. A lot of times companies will take that full 30 days, although that doesn't mean that they have to wait the 30 days. It just means they have up to 30 days to remit payment to you. A lot of places might try to push that. They might try to go 60 days or 90 days. And if it's, a very large company working with another large company, it's a lot easier to float that type of stuff. If you're a sole proprietor or small business and, you're having to pay a small group of folks salaries, the sooner that you get that money in, the more important that actually is to the success of your company. A lot of smaller companies don't necessarily have, a large bankroll to be able to float, 3 months of expected income coming in from invoices. So definitely try to fight for that when you're negotiating contracts. Try to get to as low as you can get. Net 30, I think, is pretty reasonable. And if the client that you're working with, has an understanding that you are an individual or small company, if they are a good client, they will definitely want to help facilitate you getting payment as soon as possible. This enclosed section here, I don't have anything in here, but there's a few different scenarios where I think that could come into play. Where I was talking about possibly needing to have line items for, like, let's say travel, right? And you have reimbursable expenses for travel. Maybe your client had negotiated with you that when you submit travel, they actually want to have some type of itemized report for all of the things that build up to that. So, like, let's say you had a line item for $1,500 for travel here in this invoice. You obviously wouldn't need to break out all of those individual things that added up to the $1,500 on the line items, but maybe they would require an Excel spreadsheet that does have all of the things that add up to that. You could, hypothetically in the enclosed section, leave a note saying that, travel expenses are found in the attached PDF or the attached Excel spreadsheet or something like that. Let's see. If we move down to the next line, then we have a different date. I normally put the date here as in the date that the work started that's covered in this particular line item. So for instance, like I was saying, if you submit your invoices and you bill monthly, then I would select the first date of the month that you started to do that work, and that is what I would put there in that particular date section. The PO line number, that's going to be kind of something that's a little bit descriptive of whatever the particular work is. So in this case, in this sample invoice, we're talking about if I were to be doing a certain amount of work for a client, and that contract was based off of hours worked. So it was a time and materials contract. In that PO line number there, I would just write something like, hours, or particular project hours, or something like that. If you have a flat fee type of thing, then maybe you would just call whatever a line item for whatever the deliverable is. So if you were doing some type of architecture plan, or you're doing a pen test, or you were doing, whatever it is that you were charging a flat fee for, you could put that in there. And then in the field to the right of that, the description, I normally go a little bit more in depth into that. So I would put whatever the project name is. As I mentioned, that most organizations will have purchase orders for whatever your contract is. I make sure to put the purchase order number in there as well. Again, a lot of those larger organizations end up using some type of billing software that they track all this stuff, and it normally is automatically looking for PO codes within your invoices, so it can kind of automatically go where it needs to go. So many times I've been requested to ensure that the purchase order number is included not only in my invoice, but then also in the automated email that gets sent out from QuickBooks when the invoice is created. Another thing that I like to put in there is the date range as well for that. So I gave the scenario of it being, a month-long period for the work, or sometimes I like to bill in 2-week chunks. Then I would just put, whatever the dates were for those 2 weeks there. That has us moving over to the next part for hours. Again, this is going to depend upon whether or not you are just billing a flat rate for whatever the work is, or if you actually are billing hourly. If you're billing hourly, then obviously you're going to put in the hours there. If you're not billing hourly, you could either change that header to something else, or you could just put, NA. Next to that is the rate. Obviously, again, with the hours, you'd be multiplying that and the rate, and that would give you your amount for that particular line item. If it's just a flat fee, then you just put the flat fee in there, and then that would end up being the same as the amount. And then if we had multiple line items, and that would all kind of calculate out to whatever the total balance is at the bottom there. And again, that would also be the same thing as what falls into the total due field. Let's see if there's anything else. Kind of down here, within QuickBooks, it allows you to put a memo section in there. So whatever you want to put in as maybe some additional information or something like that, that might make sense for the client, then that's something that you could do as well. And then, that's pretty much it. Invoicing is pretty straightforward, but if you didn't really have an idea of the different things that go into that to kind of make that up, you could definitely get kind of lost with that. I do know that if you aren't going to go down the route of getting QuickBooks or something like that, I think Microsoft Word has a bunch of standard like invoicing templates. Should look very similar to this. Should have, most of the same types of fields and stuff like that. I think the main things to be sure that you're doing is have your dates lined up, get your invoices sent in as soon as you can. You don't want to wait on those because the clock doesn't normally start as far as the payment terms go until they actually receive the invoice. Unless your client is super, super nice and they'll allow backdated invoices or something like that. I have run into that before, and that's a great thing, but that's not always the case. The other important things, your invoice numbers, being as descriptive as you can, and that's more so for your sake as well as your client's sake, so that if you're rummaging through a whole bunch of different invoices, you have a good idea of what specifically this one was for, and the time periods that it was for, and you can bounce it off of, whatever other data or resources that you have if you needed to re-verify some information. So yeah, that's Invoices 101 in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? I'm gonna grab a sip of water, and if anybody has anything, they can throw that in there. Got some other comments coming in. Good info, thanks. Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate you dropping in, checking this out. Hopefully it's useful. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions or comments on that, appreciate it. You can always reach out to me, hit me up, ask me any other additional questions, and yeah, if you're going down the righteous path of starting your own company and doing your own tech stuff, I wish you the best. And hopefully it is super lucrative and you get a lot of freedom out of it. So, all right, everybody have a great weekend. We will chat soon. All right, take care.